You subscribe to Panda? That's so hot. You subscribe to Panda? That's so hot.
All right. Hey, what's up, Björn, Moon2K? Thanks, guys. I guess I have to crop that camera a little bit better in a sec, but thanks for tuning in, guys. I think this is like a little bit of a special episode. I already told, I think I pinged it out even. We're gonna talk about a little bit of a trick that I came up with, and PGL actually figured it out fairly fast. I mean, it's not that crazy of a trick, but it might just be interesting.
Yeah.
And
I liked it. I when the second time I saw you do it and we figured out what you were doing, I was just like, huh, that's nice. Good idea.
Yeah, you know what? For the longest time, why didn't nobody figure this out before? You know what I mean? Nobody used this before, and I don't know why.
Well, I think we mentioned it when we were talking yesterday that there's only certain situations where it's even viable, and you just don't find yourself in them very often.
That is true. That is true. But did you tell your allies, like KillahBee, about the trick? And
yeah, we made an internal video for our FC team on how it works and distributed it to anyone who asked.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
God damn it. Even I didn't do that. Like, a lot of our OFCs probably don't even know yet, right? We kept it a little bit of a secret.
I noticed Goons don't know. I was kind of...
Oh, I told Asher right away.
So well, they haven't used it yet, I guess. But
yeah, so actually, you know what? So maybe I should just explain the trick, because people are probably like thinking like, what the fuck are they even talking about? So like a lot of times, be it a roaming gang or be it a big fleet, there's certain gates that you cannot take because it's bubble to no end, right? And you guys are known for like the amount of dictors you have, so we would have a hard time jumping into your system and then getting out again, right? So that was one of the challenges for us whenever we visited, and then I don't know why, but suddenly I was like, why don't we just throw a bubble close to the gate that drags into the gate and then just warp to a spot that's just barely 500 behind it, or 494 or something. So only that bubble actually drags, right? So all the bubbles in front of it, they would be too far from the spot we're warping to, and the bubbles behind that don't matter because the one just at the border drags, right? So we would always get dragged right on 0 on the gate. And at first, it is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
At first, I was actually thinking, surely people know, right? Like, there must be something that doesn't work with this and stuff like this, because like it seems a little obvious, to be honest. Like, now that we are doing it, basically, it was a little bit.
Well, I'll keep going, but I have a point about that. It's not as obvious to everyone as you think, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, but yeah, so we figured it out and tested it, and it worked perfectly. I wouldn't necessarily say don't do it with Titans and shit like this, right? I wouldn't warp like a coalition supercap fleet on 0 on a gate with that.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, it is an option. So what I thought about too is, and I'm sure you guys thought about it too, is if your Titan gets taken on the other side of a region gate, right? That's a fucking headache. You can't get faxes over there easily and stuff like this. With a trick like that, jumping a couple faxes
honestly,
over is an option.
So when I figured out what you were doing, that was the first thing that came to mind. Is like the only like yeah, getting your subcap fleet out of TCAG is or G Magic is nice, but it's not the end of the world. You know, you're not like we're not really changing that much. All it really does is you know, you guys can hit shit in G Magic now with much more safety, and we can hit shit in TCAG now with much more safety, and 49U and 407 and vice versa, which doesn't really change that much. I mean, it's nice, but it's not that big of a deal. But jumping capitals through a gate, that is the one use case where I thought that could actually be a game changer, because that is, I mean, the regional divides for capital ships is one of the big geographical, you know, influencers on any of these wars or capital fights, and being able to block enemy fleets from getting new capitals through a gate is pretty significant, because most capital ships don't come well, not, I mean, depends on your doctrine, but most capital ships don't come with prop mods on them. And even if they do, trying to burn a fax to a gate through 30 kilometers takes a very long time. But being able to warp capitals to a gate at 0, yeah, and with tie-dye, but being able to warp capitals to a gate at 0 with impunity, that would be a pretty big, you know, that could open up options, especially in a war like this that didn't previously exist. I too think you're right in that it's too much to risk, though, because if you fuck it up, you lose 10, you know, Titans. Rather, if you fuck it up with a subcap fleet, you lose a subcap fleet, and who cares? But
yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
it's definitely interesting. I don't think anyone will be ballsy enough to try it, but
yeah. So when we first had that tool, we prepared it actually for the jump ZXB Y-2, right?
yeah.
Turns out it doesn't help if the Titans warp to the wrong gate, you know. But but we had it prepped just in case and all that stuff. And we thought probably should we use it, right? Should we actually use it and give it away? We kept it a little bit, and we had it ready.
And then you used it for random subcap fleets. What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So much for the secret.
But at the same time, it was like with so often, it's the same with the chemos. We had chemos ready for ages before we used them the first time. And the main reason for that was KillahBee remembers the times when we were flying Snatch, right?
Yeah.
And that Snatch was mobile, but only with MGD, so it was sitting still, and chemos would destroy that, right? So
yeah,
we didn't use them because we didn't have to for I don't even know 2 years, and then the T3s got nerfed, and then I had to fucking adjust the chemo fits before we ever used them.
So my opinion on things like that, whenever you discover something no one else is about, I used to say let's sit on it. But after we had a couple of them expire, I've just been of the opinion that anytime you figure something out, use it right away, because you never know, it's probably going to get rebalanced soon. The one I'm really disappointed we never got to use is there was before Hawes back during the old tracking Titans era, when just capital turrets just tracked better than they did, and you could do 13,000 DPS tracking Titans. The tracking rigs did not stack with tracking computers on dreadnoughts. It was just a glitch, not anything game mechanic wise. And we figured it out, and we sat on it for a year, and then they finally fixed it in the patch notes. Just random little addendum in a patch note. By the way, we fixed this little thing, and I was like, God damn it! And it was actually the reason it got fixed is because of the that wormhole situation with Rooks and Kings and No Holes Barred, I think, where they were using the tracking disruptor exploit, and CCP looked at their tracking disruption mechanics, and they're like, oh, let's just fix all of the problems with this stuff, including that little random glitch.
There's still something like that in the game, actually, I believe. So
yeah,
I'm just gonna give it away. I'm not sure if that is actually still the case, but it's not as useful, right? So if you're tracking disrupt fighters, I forgot what it was. Ari, who's an init FC or assistant or whatever, she actually figured it out and made a big Google Doc about it, and I forwarded it. It's not that great of an advantage you can get with it, but if you're tracking disrupt fighters in a certain way, it actually helps the fighters, right? I forgot what exactly it was. Was it optimal range or tracking speed? But they apply much better and stuff like this. It's weird.
I think you can decrease their explosion velocity for some stupid reason because of the tracking disruptors aren't supposed to affect that, but they do. I remember we were testing tracking disruptors on fighters, but yeah. I mean, you'd have to individually tracking disrupt your own fighters, so obviously it's not viable.
Yeah, exactly. It's just too much effort to even, get remotely like a good percentage of them tracking disrupted. Yeah. But yeah, Killer, what were you thinking about the warp trick? Are you gonna use it? Are you gonna be the first one to like warp supers and titans through a gate?
I don't think so. I mean, I saw it and I thought it was cool. I didn't really get it for the first couple of minutes, but yeah, I don't know. If there's ever a situation where we may use it, I think we could. But I don't know who's willing to risk titans and supers on it, anyways.
Yeah,
like we already said, it's a bit of a risky move to be with titans, but with subs, yeah, why not? I could totally see doing it with subs. Then again, I don't really run away that often, so probably don't need to use it all that much.
I mean, we already have like supers and titans bump every now and then, even though they land off the gate structure itself, right? So now imagine they get dragged into the structure. Like everyone has to spam. It's not only a chance, like you will get bumped, so you have to spam. And then there's that one guy who doesn't pay attention, like every
it's
time.
Honestly like it's just so it's one of those things where you have like this these niche things that there may be a use for here and there. That's really like I don't do that too much because it's just a bit too artistic for me. Like trying to set up the perfect bubble for the perfect drag and all that stuff.
Hard.
I will leave that to people that have the energy to do that kind of stuff. Like Nettis Bar, he will love it. He will be all over it, and then I can just tell Nettis, hey, do the bubble thing, and then he'll take care of it. That's how I like to do it.
For anyone who wants to set it up, it's very simple actually. If you think about it, all you have to do is drop a bubble 17 behind the gate, 17, 18, something like this. So the bubble edge would always drag into the gate structure, right? And then you burn further 500 km, and then all you have to pay attention to, which maybe people are not like too aware of the fine details of how bubbles work, right? It's the bubble itself that drags. It's not the bubble edge, right? So you want to be just in range, which is 500, just in range to that bubble that you want to drag. So that's the only thing you have to pay attention to. And then obviously you want to come from the right angle, so you would actually get dragged, right? But that's it. It's not that hard to set up, really. Like one scepter and a dictator that you sacrifice, and boom, you can do it within like 2 minutes.
It's worth noting that this can't be fixed either. CCP literally can't get rid of this mechanic. They could. Extending the range does nothing. I mean, they could make it 1,000 instead of 500. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that with citadels, but it wouldn't change it. And you can't extend the range to off-grid because then we're back to the old days where you're literally getting pulled out of warp in the middle of nowhere on a drag bubble that you couldn't even see.
You know what? You know what? Someone in Corp, like I said the same thing first, right? But I forgot who it was. One of my Corp mates. I think it was Norman, right? Shout out to Norman, who's doing a lot of stuff, especially during war. He actually said something interesting. He said, what if the bubble that would drag still drags, technically, but then if there's another bubble covering that one would also drag. That would then counter the entire thing. You know what I mean? You can't extend the range too much with that. It's like 20 km you can get out of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if CCP's willing to code new shit, you could fix it all kinds of ways. I don't know about that.
But, I memean, that's technically it's possible kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like how much death time you need for that little fix, I don't know. Right?
I mean, yeah, if you could get just CCP to say like, hey, no warping through bubbles that are touching each other. Yeah, easy fix, but
yeah.
We'll see. I don't know if they're willing to do
it. I don't know if they have to fix it, right? Do they have to fix it? What do you guys think?
I don't think so. I don't see.
I don't think it's significant enough to be fixed. Honestly,
That's so hot.
It's not that big of a deal if you know that everybody like at some point everybody will have figured this out and this will just become a thing to use and you can just plan around it. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I actually invited Hai, but he's super unreliable lately. He wanted to talk about the space weather. I'm not sure if you guys have actually paid attention to the space weather.
The stupid clouds or whatever
So
they're pitching in.
I'm gonna put them up on screen just like in case you didn't look at them all that much. Maybe not block you there. All right. So.
All right, hold on. Let me pause. All right.
What were you doing?
I mean, I need to get anyway. I'm just ruining my KD right now in PlanetSide, but
You're still playing PlanetSide too, or?
Dude, PlanetSide is a great casual game. Like I know
You're blocking.
You know,
you're blocking me with this thing now. This is rude.
That's alright.
Your avatar, yeah, I think.
Yeah, my avatar.
You didn't want to be a
PlanetSide's a
camp.
great casual game, man. I mean, it's fun to play in teams too, but like it's just so easy to just get in, play for 20 minutes, get 20 kills.
Have an avatar is all I can do for you.
No, it's all good. Don't worry.
I know, but so I mean, one of those storms? I mean, there's only going to be the gamma ray with the point range. People complain about it. Like it's 100% disruptor and scram range, right? So people already complain about the kiting stuff getting too strong. But my argument would also be kiting stuff, they can also get caught way easier with that. It's not like the weapon range is extended too, you know? So, I don't know.
Honestly, I think like when I read the dev blog first, I was like, okay, it sounds pretty neat. Like about 100 things come to mind that they should be working on instead. But now, they're giving us weather, I guess, fair enough. It's neat, it reads cool, but I don't understand why people are screeching over this at all. Like, how many of these are going to spawn? I think it's like 8, right? So 8 of them will spawn.
2 for each.
Yeah, and then it's like they spread out. I feel like it's going to be just a bit more annoying than incursions, right? Where you want to attack, let's say, a random, like let's say entry constellation, whatever, to delve. In the current war, we want to attack it and then go like, oh shit, there's currently that storm going around there, and then we have to like look at what the storm does and what we can do to work around it. I don't think it's going to change the meta. I don't think it's going to change the war, right? It's just going to be something that people are going to have to work around. And yeah, I mean, obviously you can get super lucky or unlucky with these, right? Like if you get that sick armor, HP, storm or whatever in your system, then obviously sacrileges suddenly become really strong, right? And all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can get really lucky or really unlucky with these, obviously, but I don't think it's going to affect the game that much. Because there's a lot of systems in the game and they spawn randomly.
Yeah, but they move around in predictable ways, though. At least with incursions, the likelihood of some attacker being able to take advantage of it is low, because they'd have to be ready to actually take advantage of it, since it shows up totally randomly. But I mean, I already hate this, but I hate nullsec incursions too. I hate this gimmicky shit, and honestly, this is even worse. This might be better, but it also might be worse than nullsec incursions. I think it's telling that I mean, can you imagine for a second if a nullsec incursion showed up in the G Magic constellation or the TCAG constellation right now, how absolutely furious either side would be about the complete bad luck that they got. I mean, no one likes luck-based mechanics in serious games. Agreed. Especially like this one. And so I wouldn't be surprised if CCP was behind the scenes, making sure that a nullsec incursion didn't show up in one of these key constellations in a major war right now. And if you have a mechanic
I wouldn't bet on that.
Well, no, I mean, I'm saying, let's say that that I wouldn't be shocked, but I'm not saying they are. But regardless, if you have a mechanic that can't be used for nullsec wars, which is supposed to be the whole primary purpose of nullsec, conquering space and owning space and building your space empire, then why the fuck are you putting the mechanic out there? Nullsec incursions are dumb because they're completely unpredictable and just stupid in and of itself. They don't add anything. They're just annoying. These things, like, with the speed that they move around, like, I don't know what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to annoy the sov holders for 48 hours until it moves to another system, and it
Yeah,
only
pretty
affects,
much.
like, it only affects a few systems, so you just tell people, like, hey, just don't rat in that system for 48 hours. The only thing I can see this thing doing is providing really stupid ways for attackers to force you to defend your iHubs under terrible mechanics, because now I have a really good idea of what system it's going to go to next. So if this shit is showing up in your space, all I got to do is show up to one of the systems it's about to go to the night before, reinforce your iHub, and now you have to defend your iHub under minus 90% remote shield and armor rep amount mechanics. That's just so stupid. Like, it's frustrating enough that the balance in nullsec is already really annoying and difficult to work with and almost worth not playing. And now they add more things to unbalance the game instead of rebalance it. Like, this doesn't balance anything. It doesn't help. I mean, if these mechanics were good and interesting, they would apply them all the way across the game, but they only apply them to a small portion of the game. So, like, most of the game will still be playing under the same mechanics. So, why do I care about this again? Like, yeah, I can fly there every other day and maybe experience some cool new content for a few weeks, and then it either gets stale or it's good. And if it's good, it should be applied everywhere. Like, I'm with Killa. I can think of 100 things that they should have done before this, and I don't know. I'm just, it's whatever. Been playing too long to give that much of a shit about it.
I think I don't hate it as much, right? So first of all, I think one good thing is there's no NPCs on the gates fucking
It'd be a
everything
cool
up.
idea in nullsec. I don't know why they're putting this shit in nullsec, where we're actually trying to create content. This doesn't help me create content. It helps me avoid it sometimes.
Yeah,
Or
well, I
maybe I
mean,
can use it to attack people's space, I guess. Like, I guess, but that's just annoying. Then you're telling people, hey, create a nullsec empire. Oh, by the way, there's these 8 random storms roaming around nullsec, and this asshole named Progod is going to abuse it when it shows up in your space. So just get ready for that, like, it is what it is, I guess.
I mean, I can totally see people like wait, like if there's a storm in the area and it's fairly predictable that it's gonna come to a certain, let's say to 49 dash or 4-0 whatever. I can totally see people say like, let's wait for this thing to arrive and then we can do whatever, right? Be it the 90% remote rep. But at the same
Yeah, but then
time,
you're just pointing out that the game isn't worth playing unless this thing is in that system.
well,
Like,
like
you
I
can't do
that's not
anything
what
at
I'm
40-0
saying.
until that stupid thing arrives. So let's just wait and to play the game that we all
But
want to play.
so at the same time, though, that 90% thing is only in one system, right? So like, how much impact does it actually have? It's only one system. So let's say 8 systems in Eve have like a strong weird effect. The other ones, I mean, minus 50% is quite strong still, I would say, but it's not the end of the world. I guess most doctrines will still work and stuff. So people can adjust to that, I guess.
So what I imagine is, like, groups like you guys who are really good at using wormholes to get people space will try and set up traps where you come in, tackle some ratters, and then retreat to one of these systems, because that's the only way you're really going to set up a fight in it. Like, imagine pre-war if this 90%, the center of the storm was in the middle of a dead end constellation in Esoteria, for a day. How do you use it? Do you just The only way to do it is to wormhole there and draw us into a fight there. In which case, we don't really have to take the fight. We can just wait for you to leave. Unless you can set up a structure timer in there. I doubt you'll find many Rorquals mining in a system that has all these mechanics.
Yeah.
So, like,
It's
yeah,
not like
I don't know.
it's not like we don't struggle enough finding locals already, right?
Yeah, the only way I can see these being used is for, major FCs to abuse them attacking iHubs or structures by reinforcing the structures or iHubs the day before the system, and then hoping the storm moves into that system. And that's cool, I guess. Like, I'm it's whatever.
Well, at the end of the day, they go both ways, right? So you know, both sides have to play with the same effects. Not like one side has it and the other one doesn't. Obviously, there's like,
Yeah, but I mean, the defenders play differently than the attackers usually, and I can see some. For instance, plus 50% weapon damage. Now, if you're trying to put Entosis facts on nodes in that system, or any Entosis capitals on nodes in that system, anything shooting them gets plus 50% weapon damage, so they're kind of fucked. If you had plans, you know, it depends on the situation, but I can definitely see ways to min-max a fleet fight around these mechanics in a way that most standard doctrines are not prepared for. And so, yeah, if this thing's rolling up to your space and based on the random walk thing, you can identify 3 or 4 systems that it might go to. Then I could show up the day before, reinforce a structure in each one of those systems, and force you to defend them under the storm, which could be cool or it could not. People might bitch about it. I don't know. Like, I'm like Killah. I could think of 100 other things that could have been done, but it's interesting, I guess.
what about the no cloaking one? I thought that was interesting that they put one in there and said like, okay, nobody can cloak here. You know, like I've got a theory, right? So I think that no cloaking thing is more like a test run. They wanna know if they deal with like cloaking camping and stuff like this in some way, like what's happening, you know what I mean?
That seems so weird to me though, like because we said there are going to be 8 storms at the same time, right? How many 0-0 systems is there? Like the odds of the storm being in like because 0-0 is pretty empty, right? Like imagine how many storms there could be in drones and nobody would give a shit. Just by the sheer amount of systems that are in drones. Like there could be 5 storms in drones and like barely anyone would notice except a couple renters. You know, like that's just, I don't know, man. Yeah. Like I said, it's a bit like an incursion. You can get super unlucky if you're in the middle of the war, but that's it.
So one of these has minus 25% mining laser cycle time. That's interesting.
Yeah. The sick mining.
Really interesting.
I mean, same. So you think about that, like you mentioned that because that could be not necessarily rockets, right? They don't have more, but like there could be more.
I actually like that better. I actually, that's the only storm to me that's interesting and actually useful. Because that actually encourages the people who live in the space to use the storm, which, as you know, creates targets. I think Pando, you can probably speak to this more than anyone, but a lot of these nerfs to nullsec empires and PvE and crabbing is actually hurting the hunters as much as it's hurting the crabbers.
Yeah,
because there's less targets in space. So, I mean, with some of these storms, I can just see alliances being like, "Hey, no ratting and mining in that storm system until it moves," and that doesn't, to me, help create content at all. But with that one, the exotic matter storm, that creates content. There is now an active reason to be in that storm. You make more money while mining.
And then also minus kinetic resists, right? So like there's like a swarm of Hecates hunting minus or some shit. I can see that happen. But then also same for the one above that, the electrical one. It has no cloaking, and I thought about it just now, like no cloaking. Why in this one, right? It's the one with the relic sites and stuff like this, right? So it spawns extra relic sites, so maybe for like super small scalers, maybe those guys that hunt relic site dudes, maybe that's the place to be then, you know what I mean? So maybe that creates content too.
Well, see, maybe that's why I'm not a very good person to comment on this, because I don't even know what rogue drone combat sites are, so, or triclavian combat sites, like.
I have no idea though.
Same.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so maybe I will amend my earlier statements and say the way to make this interesting is to pump up the reasons to use it. But then if they're too strong, then every time this rolls through like some major empire space, like if this was rolling through the middle of Delve and giving plus 50% to mining in the middle of Delve, you know, pre-war, obviously, like it would just be 1,000 goons in the system tie-dyeing the thing out, just enjoying their mining bonuses.
But if you then look at it, so the electrical storm might just be content for super small scale guys, right? With the probing shit. Then you have the exotic matter, like you said, more mining that might just create more content too. But then the weapon damage, like imagine the ticks, you know what I mean? That might just create content too, right? So
combat sites, yeah.
Maybe the only counter content, anti-content one is the gamma ray storm. That's probably also the one with the most strategic impact on like wars and stuff like this. That could be abused the most, I guess. So
yeah, I mean, minus 90% of shield reps basically means any doctrine that relies on. Well, it's just hacks online still, ADCs, but yeah, I would say. I mean, they could be more interesting. They're giving them credit for. I know I kind of shat on them a little hard 10 minutes ago, but mainly because like, there's like 4 or 5 things that are just breaking ship balance or combat balance right now, and they've been known about for years, and they're just still there. We're in the middle of a war, and watching every fleet run from the moment anytime capitals form on either side of the divide, and here we are introducing
weather.
-25% yeah, weather.
but at the same time, the CSM made a statement: "Don't change our game because it's wartime and stuff." And then they make these changes. So either they ignore the CSM thing, or they say, "Okay, this doesn't have any impact on the war. We can introduce this." And they might be right with that. I don't think it has a massive impact. I mean, it would be unlucky if the first storm spawns in fucking 49 or in TCAG or something, right? But it's unlikely. So
it would have some impact, but yeah, I mean, that whole CSM statement was whatever. Like, hey, stop developing your game for a moment just because certain entities happen to be in a war and other ones aren't. Like, I wonder how the Veil groups that were fighting for their lives 3 or 4 months ago feel about that. Like, if you're a large enough entity, you get special treatment from CCP. By the way.
Well, apparently not, right?
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, they wouldn't have introduced it. So I guess, I mean, I think it's all right. Before, the CSM guys, they might also be all right with that part. I mean, if now, let's say, like, what are one of those issues you think though that they should have tackled first? Like, what's the number one issue you have on the list? Like, both of you. I mean, Citadels.
I mean, it's the same thing I've been bitching about for years. It's capital and super capital balance against subcaps. It's capital versus subcap balance. It's been the same thing since they changed capitals. It hasn't gotten better. I've spent 3 years trying to theory craft ways to use subcaps against capitals and super capital fleets, and there just aren't many. And I mean, you can kind of see that in the war right now, where both sides are just kind of, pussyfooting around with subcaps, running from every single capital ship the moment it spawns. And there's been some content like Goon FCs, and you and I have been doing what we can to generate content, but like it's nothing consequential. And a lot of these fights that have been happening have been because the FCs involved choose to take the fights, not because they're actually smart fights to take, which is not sustainable. But
yeah, I agree. Like,
I mean, they've made one serious change to capitals in the last 2 years, and they reduced super cap EHP, which made Dreads a viable counter, which is the whole reason this war is even possible. But you still like, over a year ago, I said, I think I put that list out of 4 things: remove halls from Titans, remove burst projectors and from super carriers, remove the GTFO from Titans, and then nerf sirens. And they did 2 of the 4. And the 2 things they did have exponentially helped content creation. Removing halls from Titans and nerfing sirens has helped considerably, especially the siren nerf. The siren nerf has probably created about 10 or 15 major fights in the first 2 weeks of the war that would not have happened otherwise, because hacks can now outrun sirens after their AB is on cooldown. No way those fights would have happened if sirens are still as good as they were. And then, in general, you can speak that Hawes not being on Titans anymore is pretty substantial to any sort of nullsec hunting.
Right.
But you still got super carrier burst projectors, which are stupid. And now you see both sides. Anytime any subcap fleets comes on their side of the border, They form super carriers and they get ready to just blanket the enemy subcap fleet with Newton web projectors and just annihilate it. And you still got long range fighter bombers got nerfed, but not nearly enough. There's a
Vendetta
couple.
web bursts. Yeah. I
So
can
they've
sing a
made a
song
lot of
about that shit.
yeah, they've made a lot of progress. Like period basis, in period basis, before goons figured out that they can just form super carriers every time, they don't need to wait for a fight to break out. There were fights happening at period basis with capitals on the field. I think carriers and dreads are pretty balanced right now.
I think, I mean, there's like a meme in Corp basically because I got triggered about Hordreds ever since Horguns got in the game, and I still believe Hordreds. It's just not a good. It's just not a good thing, right? And then the same with the projectors. It just like if I speak out and say like, "Hey, fucking burst projectors and Hordreds are shit for the game," like everyone.
They think
Yeah,
you're whining.
exactly. I'm the guy trying to like hunt these things, and I want free frags or whatever. But it is actually my opinion that like burst projectors and Hordreds, I don't think it's good. I mean, I suggested like years ago, like 2 years ago, I think it was, that Hordreds, I mean, or Horde guns should actually polarize, right? So now subcaps have a real shot against those Hordreds. Maybe on dreads it shouldn't be completely polarized. I don't know, but
I mean, Hall Dreads, they're not game breaking. To me, they're counterable at least to some extent. Maybe they could be adjusted a little more. We would have a better idea of how to adjust Hall Dreads if we could have more fights with Hall Dreads on the field. But because Hall Dreads are usually followed by super carriers and Titans, you just don't see that many fights around it. But I mean, in general, I'm of the opinion that CCP, with all the balance stuff, they seem afraid to remove things from the game, and I think it's the biggest hindrance. Like super carriers have burst projectors because the old super carriers before the capital changes had remote ECM burst, and they felt like, well, we need to
it's a
keep
unique
burst
thing.
projectors. There's no point. Like, there's no actual reason that super carriers need burst projectors. They're strong enough as it is, putting out 20,000 TPS. Like, they don't actually need burst projectors. It's ridiculous. They just have them. It's just a thing. So like any alliance with a couple of vendettas to drop can just instantly trap any fleet, for
Yeah.
free. And the counterplay is ridiculous. I mean, I've said this time and time again, but the hardest thing with super capital and capital balance, which is why I've always been for relegating them as much as possible, is that you cannot put effective counterplay in the game against supers and titans for how much they cost, because like the counterplay to super carriers is that you can defang their fighter bombers, right? Well, how much are you going to lose trying to shoot through 100 super carriers worth of long range 5.0s that each have 2 to 3 flights of them, assuming that they're actually min maxing it? Like, subcaps can shoot long range 5.0s, but you'll lose like 2 to 300 billion ISK worth of subcaps trying to do that if you were so inclined. So, like, the counterplay with capitals is all or nothing. Essentially, any counterplay with capitals is all or nothing. And when you're putting people in a situation of all or nothing balance, like, you're just not going to have that many fights that way. Like, you have to set up these long, elaborate traps that happen like once every couple months, sometimes once or twice a year. And then, like, yeah, they're really cool. They create big stories. When they killed that locust fleet of 56 oracles, everyone
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, that's so amazing." But there's 355 other days in the year where you're just not fighting at all. Like, it just kills daily content. Like the ubiquitous or the I guess just the prevalence of all capital fleets and everything. They're everywhere. Everyone knows how to use them. They're super easy to use, and it kills daily content. It's really stupid.
And since you mentioned fighter bombers, I think like one of the biggest mistakes was also to give them that on-grid warp. That was one way of actually outplaying them to a degree, right? Bait their fighters off and then reposition because subs are just more mobile. And now they just recall the fighters, boom, they're back, right? it just adds to that so much. And they tried to fix one problem with it, which, I mean, I guess that problem is fixed, because when carriers like recalled their fighters and then they landed on grids, the fighters would then warp too early and land 5,000 off and stuff. And they fixed that with it, but then we got like a worse version of the game for it, right? It's like,
well, they're afraid to do any significant change for some reason to PvP balance, because they want to see how it plays out, which is fine with me. Like, I've long said that Eve is a complicated game. You got to give a chance for the meta to develop. But we know where the meta is with this stuff now. We've had 3 years of these capital mechanics with very little changes. For instance, there's virtually no counterplay against light fighters other than light fighters in numbers, other than other carriers. Like, Kikis are okay against fighters in small numbers, but not in large numbers.
well,
There's a couple of doctrines that are okay against it, but like we like, I just recently introduced 2 weeks ago like a dedicated anti-fighter doctrine. Like, it is 100% meant for the purpose of killing fighters, and it still doesn't trade favorably with fighters. Like, if the fighters actually go after them, they lose my doctrine loses ZS score every time. Like, fighters are cheap, difficult to kill, do tons of damage, easy to skill into. It's just ridiculous.
And at the end of the day, I think also, even if it shows on the kill board for twice the price or whatever, right? It doesn't feel like you're killing something impactful or whatever, right? It doesn't feel like an achievement to kill a bunch of be it however bill of is on the board. Like, nobody actually cares at the end about the fighters. So it just doesn't feel like an achievement. But yeah. But what about you?
Yeah, Killah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Killah? Like, what do you think? Is that the number one issue? Supers, Titans, and all that stuff? Or, like, do you have something to add to that, or what?
Well, I agree that it's a problem, but usually I was in alliances that didn't sit in the receiving end of this. We were mostly the alliances using it for a long time, so we didn't. And obviously, you're not as aware of something that needs to be nerfed if you use it and you feel comfortable with it a lot, right? So I had to listen to, and I've been listening to this for a while now. So I definitely agree now with Progod. I think that the capital versus subcapital balance is still a big issue. But for a long time, I didn't really see the problem because I was not the guy having to deal with it. I was the guy using it against somebody else. I was like, oh, we're just owning shit with fighters. It's pretty cool, right? Where obviously, if you're the guy trying to hunt rock rolls and then you get super dropped on yourself and there's nothing you can do, or when you're the alliance that is fighting PL and C, whatever, right? Like 4 years ago.
There's nothing you can do. Like, before they rebalanced capitals and made them actually worse, slow cats were the name of the game, and slow cats were annoying because you couldn't kill them, but they didn't break fights. Like, they had a max range of 120 kilometers, and they only did 500 DPS. Like, they were actually pretty tankable at long range. Like, this is why goons adopted their waterboarding technique during the Halloween War, because slow cats, like, you could just sit on grid 140 kilometers away from them and just trap them there forever. And like, capitals helped you win fights, but they didn't break the game. Like, now, the example you just used, where like if Pando gets supers dropped on him, like, when supers if like 30 super carries hit the field and Pando isn't warping out in the next 15 seconds, there's a possibility, 30, 40, maybe 50% chance, depending on the skill of those super carry pilots, that he could lose his entire fleet. So now, with the way the dynamic is, like, if you're roaming someone's space and you see them ping for super carriers, you've got to start getting ready to leave. That never used to be the case before. Like, if the enemy had supers formed, like, you kept fighting, and you're like, all right, if they drop supers, we'll start pulling out. But it's just sentries. Who gives a shit? Like, now it's like, holy fuck, if we get trapped under a bunch of meme bubbles and web and nuke projectors, like, we could just get annihilated. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember at the start of World War we won. There was like this one fight where I was leading an NCPL fleet. We were in T3 cruisers, armor cruisers at the time, and we were jumping into a system, and then goons dropped like, I don't know, a bunch of Titans and supers on us, and we stayed on grid for a long time and kept fighting in that system, right, until we started losing shit more rapidly, and then we retreated. And that's something you just really can't do anymore. Like we had that one fight in, I actually can't remember the system, over that one eye up in Fountain not too long ago, was doing this war, and it ended up dropping supers on us, and the second that happened we had to leave the grid, right, like we had to warp off basically. And yeah, it's just a bit of a problem. But maybe I don't think it's as much of an issue at the moment, because honestly, like, I haven't had to deal with it in a long time. I had a very, very long break from EVE, and now I just returned for this war basically a couple of months ago. And ever since that has started, I had one occasion where I had caps dropped on me, right? And it was in that one fight, and that's it, right? So I think that those issues will become more apparent to me again when we start seeing more capital usage on a more daily basis, and I'll be on the other end of this a bit more. Right now, I just haven't had a problem with it in a long time.
Yeah, I've spent because I mean the way TESS divides up our military is, Villy focuses more on the capital side of things, and I focus more on the subcap side of things. And I've spent a better part of 3 years now trying to develop subcap tactics versus capitals, and there's not much. There's just, I mean, we've gone through about 7 or 8 different anti-fighter iterations in our subcap fleets. None of them trade well. All of them are just like band-aids to help you get off the field a little bit faster. There's no way to just like sit on grid with them. I mean, there's one tactic we have, but you need like 750 people to do it against like 50 carriers in a 250 fleet at best.
That sounds easy.
Like you need a dedicated anti-fighter fleet, then you need dedicated long-range DPS to make sure you're doing enough damage to the fax. Like, and then you still have to win the subcap fight. So,
and then it takes it's still time, right?
And that's then that's only so like we actually did it in TCAG the other day. I fucked up the bomber thing. I had the wrong doctrine for it, but before goons started dropping supers in period basis, I was setting it up in period basis because they only have dreads and carriers there. And we drew a fight in TCAG, and it was pretty much the setup I wanted. And we mostly came out even, but we were able to fight with carriers and dreads on grid for 15 minutes, which is usually not the case. We just had more people than they did. I had a dedicated anti-fighter fleet, and we had dedicated high DPS doctrines to deal with the capitals. Of course, I got them all killed, but the concept was good. Like, and then like literally the next day, goons were like, "Oh, we're gonna start dropping supers on every fight," and I'm like, "Well, so much for that tactic we've been sitting on for 2 years." Like, it's just the game balance is out of control right now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, you know what? We had some insane like Kiki fleets, like 200 Kikis and stuff like this, right? And then if you have then 50 supers, we've dealt with that. But you need 200 Kikis to deal with that, and then it's not easily done. It's not easily done. You kill those fighters, but you haven't killed a ship yet. All that time goes by. You kill those fighters, kill those fighters, kill those fighters. And guess what? There's another super jumping in, another 2 supers jumping in. Oh, another couple carriers, a couple horde dreads. Oh,
yeah, but
Titans.
You're dealing with it because they're not like if they really wanted to, they'd hit you, or if they really were on the ball, they'd hit you with newt web projectors and then start throwing lances your way, and that might get rough really quickly.
So I remember that one instance, for example, we were fighting Fraternity and the rockers were so far apart. So they dropped supers on one rocker and then we repositioned to the other one. And then they had to send those fighters all that way, right? And then you have a good shot. It's way harder to hit the projectors and way more time for us to kill the fighter. They couldn't recall them, and then they would just warp back too, right? So they had to drift all that way. It's a very different thing suddenly, right? So, we had some success, but like it takes time. And then Killer, you remember the days when we were doing the Bush Ravens, which we came up for your supers and Titans, really, right? Because you were projecting dreads and all that stuff because you knew we couldn't counter drop them because you had supers and titans in range that we couldn't counter. And so we came up with the Ravens. And the Ravens were technically able to kill them, but it took so much time. Like, it's not like, oh, we caught them and we killed 50 dreads in a minute. Like, no, you kill one, and then half an hour later you kill another one, right? So, it's just it's it's not in balance with the EHP and time you need to kill them with subs compared to how much time they need to kill the subs, right?
Yeah. Now I'm just reading some of these comments.
Good
some
comments
people are like, well,
comments.
they're super capitals. They should be unkillable by subcaps. I'm not saying that the subcap should just shred super capitals. And I think the old balance is pretty important here. And it's worth pointing out that, like most things, CCP, this is why they're reluctant to make major changes, because every time they do, they change one too many things. But like, if they had the current solve and structure mechanics with the old capital balance, it would be way more of an interesting game. So, like I said, the old supers and titans were really strong. You needed them to hold your space, but they didn't break subcap fights. The reason that they were so strong, though, is because structure mechanics required you to repair your structures as the defenders. And of course, there were no facts. All of your carriers were remote rep. So you dropped 50 to 100 slow cats on the iHub that the enemy reinforced. And if they weren't willing to drop their own capitals, then you automatically saved any one of your structures whenever you wanted to, no questions asked. So that's why people hated the old capital mechanics. So they removed that. They did Entosa's sub. We're going to spread these fights out. We're going to do DPS, the Citadel mechanics, which are really interesting, and could be good if under better actual fleet fight mechanics. But they got rid of all that, and then they changed capitals. We're like, let's change capitals too. Let's make them all kinds of different. Oh, by the way, let's make them way better against subcaps for no fucking reason. Like their solution to the slow cats thing was like, slow cats are unkillable because they can spider tank. So let's put the remote reps on triage carriers, and people can kill triage carriers. Of course, they never thought that people would just drop like 80. I don't know. They never seem to think, one or two steps beyond what people are about to do. Like the facts thing was so obvious. It's just,
for me,
I don't know.
The Titan thing was like the most obvious thing. Like, it was a major issue when tracking Titans were in the game, remember?
Yeah,
like,
that was the one that I was just like, what the fuck are they thinking?
And
Like
then introducing Hawguns. It's like, hey, you remember
everyone
tracking
bitched
Titans?
about tracking Titans, and then they put them back in the game. It was ridiculous.
It's like nobody's ever got to complain about tracking Titans anymore, because now you've got Hawguns, right?
Well, no, they had this idea. You can tell. Well, I don't want to say that, because like there were at the time involved in the capital rebalance a couple of fleet commanders at CCP, but you could tell that the facts are supposed to be the solution. All of these overpowered cat mechanics are supposed to be balanced by the fact that faxes could be killed. They couldn't remote rep each other. And so when you had capital fleets on the grid being supported by faxes, you were taking risk. What they didn't think about is, once again, that's all or nothing balance. And as we learned, to do anything to supers and titans, you had to kill all of the fax. And killing all of the fax can be very difficult when the supers and titans are shooting back at you. And so once again, it created this situation where unless you were prepared to kill all of the enemy fax, and they might have hundreds, you can't take the fight. And so they've put in fax rep cap to try and fix that, and that gets used. That's relevant like once every 6 months. When someone actually gets enough dreads in a position to drop on someone that to actually utilize that. They keep trying to do these band-aids, and they just will not address the core problem. And it's that supers and titans, and to some extent carriers and dreads, are too powerful versus subcaps. They keep dancing around it.
Yeah, I agree. I do like the fact that they actually touch the facts to a degree, but I mean, I agree it didn't go far enough, right? Didn't fix the issue. It still takes ages to kill a fax.
Well, I like the fax concept. I really do. I thought it was a smart solution to the spider tanking problem that super carriers and carriers presented. I liked it, but then they did too much other shit. You know.
Yeah.
I don't think faxes would be that bad if you know, you weren't required to warp your subcap fleet off the grid every time supers and titans dropped. But
well, I mean, to some degree, in some places, you know, let's say in low sig, if it's a smaller group, even one fax on field, or in warm-up space, one fax on field, and people already have to warp off because they know they cannot crack it, and be like, what's the
local
point?
tanks might still be too strong. I'd give you that.
So I don't know. It's not easy. I think the idea with Titans was obviously like they want to, like, someone's dropping a Titan. Ooh, and people should fear that thing. You know what I mean? They shouldn't say like, ha, you're just a floating brick, and dance around it forever with any ship type you can think of. So they want it to be feared, but you know, is that gonna make for a better game at the end? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, so I mean, the general idea, they wanted them to be strong, and then they wanted everybody to have them. That's why they did Rorquals. You know, everybody, like Grath at the time when Rorquals were released, he said, "This is CCP stating that we want everyone else to catch up to PL and NC dot." And they did. Everyone else did catch up to PL and NC dot. But at the time, I also said that balancing the game around capital warfare is really stupid, because capital warfare has no nuance for the most part, and it's all or nothing. You know, you don't take a capital fight that you're pretty sure you're going to lose, because you'll lose your entire capital fleet. Even with the 100 Workles, you don't get to rebuild that right away. I think I said it over and over again. Nobody is going to tolerate losing 200 dreads, 300 dreads every week. They just won't. They'll do it like once every 3 or 4 months, but I don't care how fast you can replace those dreads. Nobody does that. These fights are very straightforward. If you've got 100 Titans formed and I've got 60, I'm not jumping into you. But if you've got 100 subcaps and I've got 60 subcaps, I might take that fight, because subcap fights, there's more nuance to them. There's more ways that you can gain an advantage. Capital ships are stationary once they're on the grid. There's nothing to it. It's not a skill-based. There's not much skill involved. Like, yeah, you could be really good at firing your burst projector or moving your fighters around, but from an FC perspective, there are ways you can fuck up a capital fight, but there's not too many amazing things you can do to overcome ridiculous odds. And yes, I know everyone's sitting on their favorite like lance tactic that they might do to win some fight. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
Bosons, lances.
Yeah. 6 suicide bosuns to win the fight. Yeah, we'll see. But once again, who wants to sacrifice 6 titans every week? Nobody. So while everyone has in their mind like, yeah, we can overcome a capital disadvantage, we'll do some really cool suicide bosuns, and we'll do it like next year or something. Like, I mean, no, this never fucking happens. We want to play the game every day, not once a year. Like, it's ridiculous.
That's exactly, everyone, like, who's a little bit crafty and involved in this, everyone has thought about a scenario. Okay, if this and this and this happens in this perfect scenario, and we are ready with our lance team and everyone, like, like 1,000 little puzzle pieces need to fall in place, and then we can just wipe out everything. I've been dreaming about this, like, I don't even know how many times, but like every time I have to be realistic and say, like, okay, is this actually gonna happen? Like, probably not, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, that was always the issue with capital balance. Like, I remember KillahBee, to your point, although you were in my alliance at the time. Back in the day, like, PL and them used to say, like, oh, dude, Titans are balanced. Like, you can drop, like, a couple hundred dreads on them and in like a trap, and if we aren't ready for it, you'll kill a few Titans. And I'm like, yeah, but do you know how difficult it is to set up that trap? Like, the conditions have to be perfect, and then you have to also not know about it. So, like, I got to spend weeks setting this shit up, and then if there's one little mistake, like we don't get to do it. And then even if we pull it off, then now and I'll never get to use that trap again. So like, yeah, having a game mechanic balanced around these elaborate traps, and I think that speaks to the core problem with capital versus subcapital mechanics. It's that it takes virtually no skill to use capitals and supers and titans, and an unbelievable amount of skill to even stand a chance against them in subcaps. So like the you've got this extremely high skill, it's just this, the risk reward is really unbalanced. It takes only the best players can use subcaps versus capitals, and the best players usually have capitals of their own, so they're never really needing to. Like, it's a mess.
People in chat talking about Killah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm sorry. I do that a lot.
You're not on my fucked up schedule. And then
I'm tired of fuck, so yeah.
There was one question in chat from Nova Valentis, actually. He said, I want everyone to answer honestly how this war and of seeing is impacting their real life, and what kind of compromises you guys are doing, and sneaky tips how to get around real life situations for timers. I thought it was kind of interesting and kind of fitting too, right? Because in World War B, in the first one, you were completely no-lifing that shit, right?
Yeah.
But in this one, you're taking it easy. You're like a more responsible, a more mature KillahBee, right? So
to be fair, like, we're in a lucky situation in this war right now where most of the timers are actually in EU Prime, so it's actually very easy for me to play in my work schedule.
You're welcome.
Or like my work schedule, because I can, because I can just go like do my work. I'm done at like 5 p.m. and then all the timers happen. Most of the timers happen between like 5 p.m. and 11 p.m. or whatever. So that's no problem for me at all in terms of work. Also, Corona helps because home office, lul. And you can actually sort of play Eve during home office. At least I can, anyways. And then, it was a bit different when we were fighting GOTG because all this shit was time for China TZ, and it all started coming out like 4 p.m., 3 p.m. my time. I wasn't able to attend in that much. Other than that, yeah, real life situations. I mean, when it comes to like meeting friends and stuff, I do meet some friends sometimes, but I would consider myself a gamer, so I don't usually, like, I'm not the kind of guy that goes to a club every weekend, right? Like, that's just not what I do. So I usually pick a weekend, like once a month, that I want to go out, meet friends, and get drunk sometimes. And then I just make sure that weekend I'm free and there's nothing going on, either nothing going on in Eve or somebody else can take it over for me. And then I'm fine with that. I don't have an urge to go outside much more, or at least go clubbing or into a bar much more than once a month. And then if I feel like going outside and taking a walk, I can just do that during the day, no problem, right? So I don't think it's that hard. Just real quick on the first, because he asked about how much it impacts the life as well. It did a lot. Like, I can honestly say, when I got out of school, when I was 18 to when I was like 22, I basically only played Eve. I failed 3 attempts at university over Eve, and it took me a long time to like sort of wake up and realize, okay, look, you can't just play Eve all your life. You need to actually get shit done. But now, yeah, I got that under control, and it's no big deal anymore. So yeah, you have to be careful. Like, at least I had to, really push myself and get my shit together, because there was a point in time where it was not healthy.
Yeah, I think it's easy to fall into that trap because like you feel like responsible for your guys, and you feel like you're achieving something, right? So, and it's a fake version of what you should be doing in real life. You know what I mean? You should in real life have a job, and like it should be fulfilling, and you should be doing shit, and you should come home and say like, oh yeah, we did this, right? And then Eve gives you like a little bit of a lesser version of it sometimes, I feel like. So it's easy to fall into that trap of, thinking like, oh yeah, or you give yourself that pat on the back, like, yeah, you did
deep and
great.
philosophical on us, Pando.
Well, I do what I can.
Should every job be fulfilling? I don't know.
Well, that would be the dream version. That's what people would want, I would guess, right? If you have the choice between a fulfilling job and a not fulfilling job, like which one do you pick? I mean, that's obvious, right?
I think the question is your life fulfilling? And, however you achieve that is up to you, essentially. So maybe for someone, their hobby is what keeps them going, and their job is what affords it for them. So
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yes.
I too had Killah's. I too took an extra year to finish college because of Eve. So there is, anything can be too detrimental. You need to have a career and all that. But yeah, I wouldn't say that. Anyone who spends too much time on Eve that's a bad thing, as long as it's not getting in the way of their real life to an extent. But yeah.
Yeah, and like what I'm saying is, it's hard if you're involved. Like we are, for example, it's not always easy to notice. You know what I mean? Like.
Oh
yeah.
Well, that is the problem with any kind of leadership position in Eve. It's and I like to run big fleets. And generally I like to run big fleets that I had a lot of hand in designing how we're going to do it, the doctrine, training the pilots and all of that. And so, running my own alliance or co-running my own alliance, like I did with Nully and now in Test, gives me that kind of gameplay. I wouldn't get it anywhere else. But if I don't, help us defend our Sov, if I don't, there's a lot of things that Eve requires you to do in those leadership positions. You don't just get to, fire it up like Fortnite whenever you feel like it, whenever you have some spare time. So yeah, I mean the leadership positions, even for corp CEOs, that can Eve can feel like a job in that way. Even a corp CEO, if there's drama going on in their corp, they've spent years building up their corp, and if they don't take some time off, if they don't ignore a few real life things to deal with that drama right now, then that thing they've spent 2 years building could fall apart. So Eve can take away from your real life like that, and I think that's where the burnout comes from. That's where everyone's like, "Fuck, this is starting to take away from things that are more important than a video game. I need to scale back." Is when those things you've built in Eve start requiring you to play it more often than you would like, and taking away from your real life more often than you would like. And some of that's unavoidable. Eve isn't the only game like that. If you build a guild in World of Warcraft, I guess, or an outfit in PlanetSide, or anything like that, really, any hobby like that, I guess.
Yeah, I think like an FC who's like on a, like, let's say, like, I don't know what you guys got, like FC levels, but like we call like strategic level FCs, they're not going to get around making sacrifices to some degree, right? Some more, some less, obviously. Yeah. You're not going to get around that. It's just the reality of things. And I also think those FCs want to make those, they're willing to do this, right? They do that on their own, so nobody has to feel bad for like people like us. We're wasting a lot of time on this game, yeah. But
no,
like,
I would really prefer people to feel bad for me, and give me as much sympathy as possible, as often as possible.
There you go.
No, yeah, no. I mean, we obviously do it because we want to, else we wouldn't be doing it. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't regret it at all. Like all the time, and even stuff where my family is really critical about when it comes to my university attempts in the past, because my, like, especially my grandparents put a lot of pressure on me at the time, and now I got my life in order, my real life, and everything's going well. But even then, like, I never really felt like, oh shit, I should just quit Eve or whatever, because for me it's a hobby, and it's something I'm kind of. This might be a bit off topic, but there's like one of the upsides, I think, of gaming becoming much more sort of accepted within the general public of the world in general. Like most of the, back when I joined, like back when I went to school in like 7th, 8th grade, you were actually getting, like, at least in my school at the time, you were basically getting bullied just by being a gamer, right? Because it was like, oh, gamers, they all stink, they don't shower or whatever, like all these stupid stereotypes that aren't true, right? At the time, That was the thing, just because you were a gamer. And then like games like League of Legends, I think, helped a lot because suddenly everybody was gaming to some degree because everybody was playing League of Legends, right? Like and now with Fortnite, and so gaming has become such a thing that everybody's doing anyways. So that gaming is now a legitimate hobby. You can actually, if people ask you what is your hobby, you can actually say, yeah, I'm a gamer, right? And you're not like, maybe some people will give you a weird look, but most people are going to be fine with it, right? And I always compare Eve or like gaming in general to like a hobby. I tried to explain to my family as well that way. Obviously, for my grandparents, it was very hard to understand. But I told them, where's the difference between somebody having small trains and building like a small train track in their apartment or whatever, and somebody spending, some time on a computer game? I don't see a difference. It's the same kind of thing.
Even, that kind of critical thinking evades people. I've sat there and watched people who like binge watch Netflix 4 hours a night and be like, why is that any different from me playing video games 4 hours a night?
I think I have like 27 out. Like I think at this point it's like 27,000 hours in EVE Online on KillahBee, and that's a lot of time. That's probably like that's almost 10% of my life that I have on my character. Yeah, I have. So we are.
I don't even want to look mine up, to be honest.
I don't even want to know what I'm at. That's scary.
But a lot of time is logged in, not actually playing, right?
I mean, it's online time, right? So obviously there were times where I literally, when I still went to school, I would log on my character in the morning. I would go to school, and I would just leave it logged on the entire day, right? It would log off at DT, but usually right after DT, I get home from school. So then I would log the character back on, just leave him logged in. So obviously a lot of those hours are just idling. Yes.
Yeah, but think about all that time you were playing Eve, the Discord side of Eve,
or the
forum hosting side of Eve, or the PIFA or EFT side of Eve. Like, I think that balances out. Like, I know I spend about 4 times as much time on Eve outside of the client than I do inside the client, which,
yeah, 100%.
Probably a bad thing,
I said that
game is concerned, but
I said that during like World War B, right? I always say during World War B1, I was playing Eve for 16 hours a day, and that's probably accurate. But actually, playing Eve online, the client, was probably like 4 hours a day at most, right? Yeah. But there's just constant stuff going on in Discord, coordinating with people, telling people we need to get this done, that done, blah blah blah, and that is time as well. Like you cannot be like going to school and at the same time coordinating all that stuff. You're just not going to be able to pay attention in school, right? So that's you have to factor it in as well.
Yeah, it's I mean, part of that is like, there's a lot of different ways to play Eve, so we choose to do that. Like, I mean, you could just join, like, I don't have to be in Alliance leadership. I guess I could just join like Spectre Fleet, or I don't know if that still exists. One of those groups like that. But yeah, I mean, now that we're in a war, this war has reminded me that there really is no itch like being a fleet commander in a major Eve war. Like, there's just nothing in gaming even remotely close to it. So it's kind of reminded me why I put up with all the shit that you have to when you're in a corp leadership or alliance leadership or any role with responsibility in Eve Online. So it's worth it. It's frustrating, but it's definitely worth it.
And then another comment
Bomber's Bar.
From Nova. And Nova is actually from Bomber's Bar.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And then he says, I really think Eve gave me a lot of real life skills that I just later realized. I'm not too sure about that. I mean, I think leadership and like people skills more than anything, right? Like just managing people, I think definitely. Like,
I think so. I mean, it's hard to tell if I wouldn't have gained those same skills. The problem is I've been playing Eve for so long now that it's like it's hard to differentiate what I gained from Eve and what I gained from just getting older. So
yeah.
But like, yeah, I would say Eve's given me some real life skills for sure. There are definitely at times in college when I felt like I was getting more intellectually stimulated from Eve Online than I was from college classes. That's for sure. But I don't know if that's a comment on our university system or Eve Online.
Miranda says, oh my god, panel, let's have the leadership debate again. So Miranda is in the US Army, right? And I said, actually, so just from from a leadership perspective, how much do you get to lead? Like, she's an officer in the US Army, right? So how much do you get to lead people on a daily basis, right? Like, and what is it? Like, is it going to be like, oh, can you move this box over to the left side instead of the right? Like, what kind of decisions are you making, right? Is it impactful decisions? Is it like, do you have to actually manage people all day and like get around them, like get them motivated to do certain things, like in a proper way, give 100% and all that stuff? Or is it just like, on a daily basis, it's probably like pretty, like you're not gonna get to lead all that much, you know what I mean? While in Eve, if you're in a leadership position, you can get way more experience. Even though it's not real life experience, you still get leadership experience on a more on a more constant
I would even speak more than that. I know you're kind of digging at Mirandalorian there, but I'd say Eve, you even get better leadership. You get better leadership experience than you realize, because if there's one thing I've noticed about real life, is that there's way more leadership positions than there are leaders in this world. Everyone's got bad bosses, bad managers at some point in their lives. People with authority who don't necessarily know how to wield it properly. But and so, like, let's say you're at a job and you have a bad boss. There's something holding you at that job to an extent. You can find a new job, but it's a pain in the ass. Quitting a job is stressful, and moving from job to job takes effort, and you may not be willing to do that. So you put up with a bad boss, or in the Army, you have to put up with a bad officer, I'm assuming. So, and Eve, that's not the case. Eve has a really good way, and most, I guess, a lot of video games in general have a really good way of, picking which groups are good at, led properly. Because in Eve, if you've got a bad alliance leader, you can just take your corp and leave. No harm, no foul. You could just leave whenever the fuck you want. You got to move your assets, but that's not that big of a deal. And loyalty holds people in places to an extent. Yeah, but especially new groups. This is why the history of Eve is generally like 5 or 6 of the main entities that you've known forever. The Goon Swarms, the Test Alliances, the Pandemic Legions, where loyalty actually does hold them in place, and they've also been generally well run for over a decade. And then just hundreds of B-tier alliances with random, like a random roster of corporations. The history of Eve has just been flavor of the month alliances coming and dying, by the truckload. They've happened constantly. So, I think you learn how to be a pretty effective leader in Eve Online, because you have to convince people to follow you when they have so many other options, and there's almost no barriers to them leaving your group. This is why fail cascade is a word in Eve. The moment things look bad, if a failed cascade starts, all the corps just like, yeah, well, let's leave. Let's go somewhere else. There's not really much holding them in place.
Yeah, you know what? When I think of like leadership, like I was like, I'm not sure if KillahBee did the military service. Maybe that was before your time. Just you barely missed it, probably.
Yeah, I didn't do military service.
Like I had to do it
compulsory military service in Germany.
Yeah, we had a mandatory military service for basically until, what was it, like 2010 or something, or 8?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know.
Something like that.
But I think
America should have that shit.
I think it's a good thing, actually. I'm not even kidding. Yeah. A lot of young guys profit from that. Trust me. Like I saw a couple guys go in as a complete fucking, I don't even know what to say, but they came out like, they matured just in a year,
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say was like, so there was like 2, what do you call it, instructors, right? That one guy, like, I don't know why, like, I still remember like, his name, Oberfeld Deutsch, right? That's his name. And he, like, everyone wanted...
Is that a gamer tag, or is that an actor?
Not the first thing was a rank, and the second thing was the name.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. I don't speak other languages.
But the point is, that guy, like, he was like a proper, like, a leader. So everyone wanted to lead, wanted to follow him, and nobody wanted him to be disappointed in the group or whatever. And then there's other guys, I forgot the other names or whatever, but But like where everyone's like, well, do we have to like this fucking shit bag? And you always have that in the military, right? You have the good guys and the bad guys. But I think in Eve, you almost have to be that good guy that people want to follow. There's no other way around it, right? You cannot be that shit face. I mean, from time to time, you can have your moments, but other than that, in general, on average, like.
No, I mean, I generally think it selects for people who have at least some leadership qualities. I mean, yeah, there's some that are better than others, and people rag on a few alliances as being led by shitbirds and things like that. But for the most part, that shit always plays out pretty quickly. And any group that has bad leadership generally falls apart under the first moment of real stress. And the ones that have good leadership, hold together even after they get evicted from their space. Like for instance, I know Expect Initiative will miss a beat pulling out a fountain, where I know most alliances, when they lose their space, they're under real threat of just falling apart entirely. So I mean, well-led alliances, what's happening in the game doesn't really matter that much, as long as people are still confident in leadership. They'll be like, well, the next thing we do will be pretty good, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think there's always a few also in inits that are too stressed out by like losing space or whatever, like probably like younger players or people that haven't been in init for a long time. So but yeah, in general,
that wasn't a dig, people in chat. I'm not digging at Initiative for losing Fountain. I'm
I thought it was a compliment.
Yeah.
To say that we can lose space and not be bothered, which is, I think, a great assessment.
Yeah. I mean, for all three of the people in this room, we've all lost our space often enough to not to take it personally. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's I mean, some of the alliances that are around right now, like bad leaders do get into places. There are a couple alliances that, yes, what's his name, Pansufan. It's Pansufan keeps somehow convincing people to join his alliance, even though he is a known scumbag, and I can say that publicly. And he scams corps that don't know any better into joining his alliance. So I mean, maybe that's a skill, that's a leadership skill. But the moment they come under any real stress, and he
fumbles,
lies about real life situations that the normal person would consider morally reprehensible to lie about, and leaves his alliance hanging, then that alliance falls apart too. So I guess once an alliance is put under stress, that's when you find out if they're well led or not.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that can bring out the worst in people, right? Like if you lose your space, sometimes someone loses his shit, and then this entire FC team might just fight each other. Like stuff like that happens. I wouldn't say all the time, but it happened before, right? And it's stressful on people, unless you have done it before and like you're gonna be all right at the end of this. Right? Enjoy the ride. I hope, like bumpy it might be, and
Well, I think what I used to tell Nully leadership, because I used to get Nully kicked out of our space all the time when I was younger, because I would shit talk Shadu and things like that, and then Shadu would come and be like, "Oh, by the way, we can still kick you out of your space whenever we want." I'd tell our guys, like, as long as we are still fighting effectively, even if we're losing our space, as long as there's still something to show that leadership knows what they're doing, there's that leadership is competent, then as long as there's confidence in leadership, people will follow us whatever we do. So I think it's once this is why some of the things that alliances say, like, oh, we'll never lose this region, and then they lose it. Like, you got to be careful about saying stuff like that, because that's the kind of stuff that can make the line members think like, well, fuck, our leadership doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, don't name your alliances after regions and stuff like this. It's not a smart move. Like this, that's another thing. Like a year ago, I would say a year ago, people were still thinking, right, it's impossible to kick goons out of their space. It's impossible that anyone would catch up ever and stuff like this. And now there's a real possibility. I'm not saying it's happening. I would still think, we're gonna put up a fight. Let's see what happens. But it's a possibility, right? So everyone has to at least see that. So
we haven't talked about the war yet, by the way. But,
yeah, that's true. We had 1.5 hours actually, right?
Yeah, defensive mechanics in this game, the way they are, no war is unwinnable for the defenders, no matter how many people are attacking them. Obviously, I'm confident that we'll be able to, successfully invade. Otherwise, I wouldn't be putting in the effort. But yeah, it's definitely gearing up to be a good war. I think both sides. I would say both sides are playing to their strengths really well. Obviously, I think y'all have made some mistakes, but
I think
it
so
is what
too.
it is. I think I'm sure you guys have assumed we've made some mistakes, and I know we've made at least a few. So I think goons are doing the things that they do really well, and struggling in areas where they usually struggle. Um, I think we're doing the things that we do well, for the most part, well, and we're definitely struggling in areas where we usually struggle. I think, if my honest opinion, I think y'all missed some opportunities in Fountain to defend it a little better than y'all did. But
I agree. I mean,
it's a tough
so when you
situation.
say that, I'm not sure if I should go into that. But if you say that, are you
Yeah,
thinking about just in it or the entire coalition? Right?
the entire I mean, you guys are one
Yes.
team.
Yeah.
It's the same war, so that's a mistake in and of itself. If it's just a Nit's fault,
No,
it's
no,
definitely
no, no.
not just a Nit's fault.
Yeah.
It's the whole coalition's fault. Um, I don't want to get too much into it until the war's over, because some of these mistakes are still correctable. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe they're not mistakes at all. But yeah, I definitely don't think Fountain was undefendable, or that it should have fallen that quickly. I think based on how y'all did it, you've made all the right decisions. Obviously, I think you could have done some things differently. And
Yeah.
there's some
Well,
things we could be doing differently that we just didn't set up, or we're just not skilled or capable enough to be pulling off on our front. But for the most part, I think everyone's playing pretty well. I mean, you guys have done about as well as you could with the situation you were in. You were pretty outnumbered. Goons are performing pretty well. I think we're performing pretty well. I mean, Goons got knocked around for the first couple of weeks before they really got their defense strategy lined up, and then once they did, they're properly utilizing their defensive advantages now. We had a ton of success in the first 10 days, and then we kind of had to scale back a little bit once Goons started defending better. But I mean, both sides are now scoring wins pretty regularly. Pretty much anytime either side goes across each other's borders, it's a win for the other side. I think we lose every time we go into TCAG now, and for the most part, you guys lose uh, every time y'all come into 407 or G Magic. But that's not always the case. There's some wins on both sides occasionally.
let's talk about caps, right?
Yeah, well, there it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the next phase of the war plays out. I mean, I think we all know it's coming. It's just a matter of cleaning Fountain up and then going from there. So next couple of weeks will be nice little lull in the content, while the Fountain gets finished, and then we'll really get to see the game mechanics, that the balance of this game in its full glory, when everyone really starts going at each other for a Aquarius Delvin period basis. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, when it comes to Fountain, right? So we had more plans to do certain things, which I'm not really going into now, but like, and then it just, I felt like it took too long, and by the time we, would have had the necessary tools in place, the opportunity was lost, right? So
Yeah. Well, it's tough, man.
we gave
Like,
it a
I mean,
shot anyway.
it's really hard to organize that shit. I don't think people realize. Like, I mean, we had like a list of things that I wanted to have ready for day one of the war, and Billy had his stuff too. And I mean, we maybe did like 25% of it. Like it is really tough. And then like, we get 3 days into war and realize that half of them were a bad idea anyway, and we kind of don't feel that bad about it. But like, you get in these wars and then you realize your doctrines need to change, your tactics need to change. Like, it's just impossible to predict this shit. I will say that one of the things, I stand by everything I said on July 5th during my speech, I guess. One of my criticisms of the Imperium, which you guys are a part of, was that y'all hadn't really fought many wars. Yes, you wiped out Tribute, and you won that one war in the north, but both of them were pretty easy, and you were able to position your supers and titans to wipe it out. Most other groups had fought some longer wars and really experienced these game mechanics, and I would say, I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I have a good idea of what you're talking about. And the opportunities you missed in the first 2 weeks were knowable if you guys had more experience with the current Sino-Jammer mechanics and the current capital instruction mechanics that other people who fought more wars had.
Yeah, I think I don't know what you mean, right?
Well, we can
I mean,
talk more after the war. I don't want to give them away, during the war, but yeah.
Yeah, let's set up a date. Like when the war's over, we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna sit down and then go down from the start to the beginning where the mistakes. It would be interesting, I'm sure. I actually wanted to make a little bit of a logbook, and then I'm recording.
I thought
most
about
of the
that
fights.
too. I wanted to do like a daily journal, and like I got 4 days in the war and I hadn't done one day, and like I was spending every single one of my non-work hours just coordinating shit, and I was like, this isn't gonna work. It's just I know, you just don't have any extra fucking time for it.
It's actually really fun. I did this with Aerith at the CSM summit like 2 years ago or something, 1 year ago. We both like me, Aerith, and Jintan were in a room. Jintan had supplied us with some green herbs, and then me and Aerith got high as shit. Basically, both Aerith and I were super high, and we just like recapped everything from World War B. Leading that was the CSM summit right after. So I think it was after X47. But before the glassing of Tribute, and we just sort of recapped everything from like World War B to X47. Him from his perspective from the Imperium, and then me from the sort of the PanFam perspective, and it was pretty amazing seeing like what moves that I made and the way I looked at them, and then the way he looked at them and they looked at them. So it was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. Guys, it's we're over 1.5 hours, and I think it's getting late, right, Killer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm dead.
Friday night, man. It's a party night.
All right, when ProGod is going to party, Killer's probably going to bed. Guys, then thanks for coming, and I enjoyed it very much. And good luck in the war, I'd say.
Yeah,
and
I mean, good luck to me. I agree. See you out there.
And the guys on stream, thanks for hanging out. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I would say see you guys on the next one.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.